maybe at the maybe we should have
Live.
Yeah.
And we're live. I think we're having a coup here. Seth, would you like to
Well,
introduce
I was going to suggest that we start by introducing ourselves, since
All right.
not all of us are actually visible.
All right.
Should we say that this is the SLIP committee meeting reboot? Should we say that first?
Yeah, and I'm Seth Tissue from the Scala team at Lightband.
I'm John Pretty from Scala Center. Hello.
Take a good look. All right, going back now. On the other side, hi, I'm Adrian, Scala team lead at Lightband.
I'm Heather from the Scala Center.
I'm Sebastian from Scala.js.
I'm Martin from.
And we have Jorge.
Yes, I'm Jorge from EPFL.
And I'm Josh Surratt with Google.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, so I think we have a couple of fun topics today. I think we're going to start with a little bit of a meta topic, talking about slipstreaming the slip process or something like that. Is that a good?
The slipstream, yeah.
Yeah. So given that they tend to be closely related or tend to be touching on similar topics, I think it makes sense to have one meeting for both language improvements and library improvements. And so I would second the motion that was put forth by a couple other people while we were preparing for the meeting that we have one meeting.
I think also SIPs are likely to be less frequent than slips.
Hopefully.
Another difference between the old SIP process and the new SLIP process is that the new process is GitHub based, right? So the old thing was Google Docs with proposals and page on the Scala site. So the GitHub thing I think has been very successful. I think as everyone expected. So we can standardize on that.
Mm-hmm. Yep, definitely.
Are we still going to have the mentorship relationship?
Yeah, I think every proposal needs a shepherd. Like you need to get someone who is used to getting stuff like through the process, get them excited, and that's going to be the path through this whole thing. I think that's a good test for a feature. If you need to get one person interested from the core team, and eventually, clearly we want to grow the core team, and a great way to become part of that is to make proposals like that and get them through the process yourself for the first time.
Right. It would be good if we could still have a link on Scala to essentially the proposals, maybe by category, accepted proposals, proposals under consideration.
Yeah,
because it helps discoverability.
Yeah. No. Yeah. We should talk about mechanics, but probably off the air. Okay. Is there anything else about this topic that we should talk about?
Well, just what are we gonna name it?
Oh no, we're already.
I think SLIP is still fine. Scala language improvement process, right? Like it was going to be Scala library improvement process, but let's just change it to language.
Yeah, I think the L can be like language and library interchangeable, and that works for me.
If you wear your headphones this way, it's language, and if you flip them, then it's library.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so let's make this convention, but that means you can't get rid of those.
So I made a joke about L also standing for module, but I mean it's actually kind of a serious point because there's a ongoing problem with people thinking that we're making the standard library larger, and so avoiding the L for library, equaling standard library, I think is worth avoiding actually.
So actually, that's one point I'd like to throw out there. I think our goal in library improvement should actually be try to get an external library to do something and then deprecate it in the internal library. I think that's actually a healthy goal for a lot of things in the internal library, if possible.
Yeah.
Seem fair?
Yeah, I mean, 2.11 started us on that path, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's making good strides. But like, if you're going to make a library proposal, it should not be, I want to be part of the standard library. It should be, here's something the standard library probably needs to like call out, and I want to be something that people look at. But we're not going to add it to the standard library.
Yeah, I mean, this is a whole. I think we could talk for a whole day about this, right? I think we're all starting to converge on having a notion of a smaller core library and modules that are easy to either distribute and just get as a whole big zip file when you install Scala, or maybe through SBT or a similar interactive experience. And that's definitely one of the important things that we're going to have to flesh out over the next couple of months when we switch our attention to 2.13 and which is going to be a library release. I'm definitely in favor of slimming down the core library. I mean, then we have to define what is the core library, of course, exactly, and carving out a couple more modules like we started in 2.11, and then we have to find a good process to deliver all that functionality. We've had some discussions about that in the past. I think it'll also tie into the discussions about the package index that the Scala Center is developing as a way to discover functionality, as a way to distribute it. Yeah, I think maybe we can shelve this topic for this meeting, but with the general consensus that this is going to be one of the important things to really figure out for the next.
Yeah, sure.
And, in general, I think it's important that modularization, we don't just do it for modularization, we do it so that people can own a module and we can more easily replace a module. People that don't want the module can not install it if they don't want it. And a module can evolve more quickly than the core library. I think those would be my primary goals.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of people suggested to me that you could even strip the standard library back to just a couple of collections, not even the majority of the collections library.
Yeah.
And have all of the additional collections that aren't required for interactions between the compiler and the standard library.
Yeah, I think it's worth exploring that. I don't know.
I agree. Yeah, worth exploring.
That's what people find most upsetting about Haskell, by the way. They
Yeah.
do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think a giant shooting ourselves in the foot.
Well, I think the point is that somebody should write that proposal, and then we as a committee can discuss it in a meeting.
Yeah.
But the point is that that's the kind of proposal we'd look at, and the kind of direction.
I think, Martin, the main benefit would be that you could evolve the collections library much faster. It might be that everybody still uses the same one, but you'd have.
I think this is the eternal tension of how fast do you want to evolve core things like this, and I think a lot of people are actually very happy with the collection library, and I think a lot of people are very productive with it. Right, really hits on the right intuitions for a lot of people. And yes, of course, it's not perfect, and we're going to clean at least some important parts of it up. But at the same time, I also agree that the collections are, for a large part, people think of Scala as the collections library. Like, that's not something you can easily disconnect for a lot of users.
Yeah, I guess a good guideline is if it's in every book and in every course ever published about Scala, it belongs into Scala. You just can't split it off anymore. It would be. It's a completely academic debate to say, well, that everybody who wrote Scala as this thing, but now it's going to be something else because they're going to split it up.
Yeah,
So,
but I think there's different angles on this discussion. I mean, you can also look at it from the engineering side and just say, well, it's good to have a well-defined interface, and that's what a module will kind of force us to do.
absolutely, yeah.
And it's good for other advanced users who want to try that, as a side effect of just having like a well-defined interface, that they know what they need to implement.
I also
if
think
they want
a bit of parallel collection, so things that are less often used, that complicate the design. But
Things that are not portable.
things that are not portable.
Well, so can I throw out, like, first of all, collections are the most imported library, like, ever. In any code, right? Like, everybody uses them. But second of all, stability is important. Having a collections library that doesn't change is part of the success of Scala. The fact that it's been relatively stable for so long. I was just trying to help John with his trivia questions, and I was looking at Scala history and how many changes have occurred in the collections library over time. And there's basically been one significant refactor, and other than that, it was just additions and stabilization.
So I think contract.
What was the refactoring? Was it 2.8?
2.8, yeah.
But there was another one for 2.9 when parallel got added, and things got a lot more complicated.
Yeah, but that's,
I guess I didn't count that because from a user's perspective, it wasn't like terrible. In terms of like the core how you interact with collections and like the different interfaces and things. But yeah, you're right. Like internally, it got crazy there.
in the interest of time, let's stay with libraries, but maybe switch from collections. And I think John brought up an interesting point earlier. No, actually, sorry, Josh, it was you about experimenting both with library extensions or changes. And compiler or type checker mostly changes. So we know how to do it with compilers, and actually Darren wanted to suggest one thing to the table before we go to the more interesting topic of libraries. Is I'm wary of getting into the Haskell conundrum of which flags do I need to enable to use this piece of code, or this library, even worse. And so I propose that all experimental features, so all like staging and experimentation for slips, goes behind the same flag, X experimental. And that means all SIPs are in together. If you have a shitty implementation for your SIP, you're crashing the compiler for everyone else who's trying out different SIPs. I think that's a good driving mechanism to say this is not, this is not just a playground. It's actually experimental means we're experimenting with this for future inclusion, and this is not just.
Would it be worthwhile saying don't use compiler flags for things that can actually be enabled by imports, language imports?
That would be my suggestion as well.
Yeah, but I'm talking about things like the 27, what's its number?
Which
can be a language
but
import.
that can be a language import, I think. It doesn't involve change to the
It could be
parser.
under experimental. You could say import language experimental high-order unification, something like that.
Yeah. I'm just what I'm concerned with is the combinatorial explosion of all kinds of different features that users will just you get this cargo cult of
So can I throw two things in? One is you want to track which of these features get used to evaluate, right? So like the language level import would allow us to track it on GitHub.
Start again. Sorry.
Oh, did you lose me?
No, we were still talking. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Tracking the features is important. So we want to know who uses what to some extent to do evaluation. So like if somebody adds a new feature to the language and nobody adopts it at all during the phase, how do we evaluate that feature? Whereas like this change for that Miles has already, a whole bunch of the cats and type level community has started adopting this thing in and is using it, and we can actually track this on GitHub by just looking for who's using this plugin, right? Or looking who's using the flag.
Is that if it was done with flags, this is something that the index could do. I guess it would only matter when things are published. Not just anything on GitHub, but published libraries that make use of this flag. We could basically figure that out somehow with the index and make that somehow known.
Right, exactly, which is an argument for a separate flag. But on the other side, I totally agree with Adrian. When you have feature flags like this, they can explode hugely. I may or may not have about 5 feature flags I'm dealing with right now that I own at work. And it's a pain in the butt because as soon as your feature is released, you want to cut the flag out of the code base because it adds really hefty amounts of complication, right? So you want these things to be short-lived, long enough to figure out if the feature is viable, and allow people to experiment with it, and then die as fast as possible.
Yeah,
that has to happen.
I think that's one of the issues with having it as an import, because then it becomes an entity with a longer life. On the other hand, you could say, well, now we can have something that we can deprecate, and that way we can handle the cycle. So I'm not saying I'm dead against imports. My main concern is that I really want to have a forcing mechanism to have these things be of good quality to make sure that all the interactions are caught. If you make it too fine-grained, it might be a while before you actually hit on like the exact combo that will cause something to break.
Yeah. One disadvantage of having them all behind a single flag is that there might be some bug introduced by some experimental
Yeah,
feature.
that's great. I want that. I want the other one. That's extra motivation to fix that bug very quickly.
Can you do both?
It might preclude people using experimental tools.
It's experimental.
Yeah.
So,
It's like I think breakage has to be expected and has to occur. I think that's one of the things that we've actually done maybe wrong with our experimental features, that they haven't been experimental enough, and people have very high expectations of the robustness of experimental features.
That's actually one thing that, yeah.
I have an argument against merging all the experimental things into one flag. Good by practice. I mean, already in Scala.js you have. I mean, I'm just giving the example because it's very common in Scala.js. You have JS functions, and you cannot use parameter type inference on them because they're sads. So when people tell me, hey, wait, how do you add the type on this thing? I say, well, if you're targeting only to 11+, you can add the experimental flag because it will enable SAM-driven type parameter inference, and it works. But then everyone answers, oh, yeah, but what else does experimental enable? I don't want to enable
that's exactly
everything.
the point. That's exactly the point. You want you want to create this. Anyway,
Yeah, but you might also add a very strong fear into people not to try the experimental stuff. They only want to try the one thing they want, and not everything that.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I think let's put this on pause for the meeting for today, and I'll give it some thought. I mean, maybe one mark on this.
I think an experimental import namespace like with nesting gives you some flexibility there. The other thing that I guess we should look at is that the problem is you can do all sorts of dirty things in your package and then release it to the world, and it's squeaky clean. Right. So is there a way to maybe in the package index to actually flag these?
Yeah.
So sometimes you find that this thing won't be around for too many other releases because the thing it relies on might go away.
So you mark that in the package index, like a big red, like experiment this person.
So that should be a flag for customers to say, well, this package is actually probably pretty shaky because it uses some highly non-standard.
Yeah, we've talked about that in the past, right? That we would have a bit in the class files that
exactly
pickle stuff. You just say, well, this was using these flags.
I have a proposal in my keynote for another thing with essentially implicit conversions that do too much. That's another big risk. You get a package and it doesn't give you an implicit conversion that then essentially gives you maximal surprise.
Yeah,
so
I think that's
also things we should flag to say, well, you use a package that converts into strings, you should be warned. That's the thing.
Yeah, I think that's a good concept. One thing I do want to add about the experimental feature is that this shouldn't be things that are fireable as such. Like, I think it's good to track this as a kind of a quality indicator and a stability indicator of the package, but it shouldn't turn into a mechanism to say, well, you're using this experimental package, now you need to compile under experimental as well, because then before you know it, the whole ecosystem will be
that you shouldn't. Yeah,
and so I think that should be part of the definition, is an experiment is something that one project can try and doesn't affect any of its users. And so, for example, Miles' example with hardware verification is a good example of that. You can just try it locally on your machine and see if it makes for less typing on your checkout.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, his other pull request about more implicit argument lists, that has the potential for complicating use of something that's compiled with that code. I mean, with Uncurry and so on, like at the binary interface, it doesn't matter that much, but it still affects usage of those calls at the source level. So, yeah, I think those are perfect pull requests to illustrate the distinction between what is, I think, a good experiment and what is something that is bigger and really needs the whole process before we can start experimenting with that. I think with that, we should move on to the next topic.
Did we finish experimenting with libraries?
Oh yeah, so that was going to be the next topic because this was all experimenting with the compiler. So
So basically, I think that in terms of one of the things that the slip process is kind of lacking is we make a proposal for a library change. Usually involves some function signature changes, possibly removing classes, adding new ones, that sort of thing, like changes to future or try or whatever. and these changes are all well and good, but we don't really know what they're going to look like to users. We don't really until they're committed, kind of a thing. So what I'd like to know is if there's a way that we can essentially have like an experiment flag where users can kind of use a flag or an import that will give them the feel of the changes to the library, force them to code as if the new library is in place, but they're still compiling against a previous version, kind of a thing. So my thought process here would be a set of tools for library change authors to do like deprecated under flag, right? So we could go back into even 2.11 and deprecate things that will actually be deprecated in 2.12, but just to kind of run it against a code base and see how many warnings you get of particular kinds of usage. Is it possible to have different signatures for methods or signature changes and actually have a little hook that will basically warn you if you're calling something with the wrong signature? So if you need to change the implicit argument list, right? And it would be an actual binary breaking change. Can you make a secondary method that people would call that's synthetic, and then have behind a feature flag like calling this method instead? Those sorts of things, right?
Well, I think we've talked about this along the lines of having deprecation, the version of deprecation actually be something that you can switch on with the flag, and the type checker just wouldn't see methods that are not yet available based on that, or no longer available. So for example, some implicit that is now deprecated or will be deprecated, if you're running under that deprecation version, you wouldn't see that implicit conversion anymore. And you could overloads of which different versions for different deprecation, and so you don't see those signatures at all. I think something like a crossover between allied and deprecated is something that you could experiment with, but yeah.
This is specifically for the case, which has happened to me twice, where I wanted to change the implicit arguments to a method, which would break the binary compatibility, but would not break source compatibility. Right. Therefore, it has to happen in a major release, but I wanted to have it as an option to try in a previous release, right? So, like, how do you make that happen?
Yeah. Yep.
By the way, generally, do people feel like the deprecation, the way we do deprecation in Scala is working? Just to add some context, it seems like a very, very slow process to me.
It is slow, but I have seen code bases get updated with deprecation removals.
Yeah, I think, for example, I want to deprecate now. Adrian, could I deprecate a method in before the 2.12 release? Is it too late?
You have like a couple of weeks.
So let's say
buying me a beer later. No, in principle, yes.
But let's say in 2 months I found a bug and wanted to deprecate a method. That wouldn't make it into 2.12. We would get a deprecation warning in 2.13. It would be removed in 2.14.
No. We actually have been adding deprecations during 2.12x cycles.
Right. Okay.
The reason I said no now is because M5 is too close and we don't have time. Yeah. But in practice, I think we've been a little bit more liberal, especially for the collections library, to get the parallel collections set for modularization. Sent to the farm and so on.
Yeah.
Is through that mechanism of adding deprecations during the 2.11x cycle.
So I was definitely going to say it should be minor versions where deprecation warnings can be introduced.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I think the problem there is that when people do compile under X fatal warnings, that's actually a breaking change for them.
Yeah.
And so that's another reason to have more precise configuration for your error and warning messages. And potentially a way to kind of pivot on versions in your deprecation, like handling of deprecation warnings. Like, for example, deprecation warnings introduced in 2.12.0 are errors, but anything after that is a warning, for example. Okay. And so then you could say, well, anything that the major release shipped with, you shouldn't use because it's definitely going to disappear in 2.13. Anything that is in a later release is actually only a warning, or something like that.
Warnings are fatal.
Yeah, that's I think that a lot of people have asked us for.
Yeah. I mean, I get spurious warnings for some things which I can't work around, so I can't use fatal warnings.
Yeah, that's one of the features that we had to drop from 2.12 because we simply didn't have the time. But a lot of the error reporting internally has been reworked a little bit so that there's like a central hook to do some filtering and changing of severity and stuff.
I wonder if anyone has actually tried to do that as an SPT plugin, of saying if you want fine control over fatal warnings, just put that in SPT rather than
you can now. Like the reporter class is configurable. So on the command line, you can specify a class name, and that'll be instantiated instead of the standard reporter, and so you could just.
Oh, except in SPT, it uses its own instance of the reporter, if I recall correctly.
You need to do some more hacking to get your reporter class in there, but on the command line, we have a switch where you can just change out the reporting mechanism and experiment with that. But yeah, so SumSnit did that work to make that configurable, and showed how you could do like how you could change deprecation warning reporting with that. But we haven't really taken that. I mean, that's something that we could work on in 2.12x cycle. It's not really something that needs to go into 12.0.
So anyway, to bring this my question to a close, I think it sounds like there are tools which we have either talked about or already exist to actually do library level experimentation. I think what I might do is as my action item, if you will, is try to put together a how to make library change helper guide of like things that you can do if you run into scenarios. So like this deprecation warning thing. As I identify tools that might need to be written, I'm going to either ask for help or see if I can implement some things. But I do think that running library experimentation is going to be important, and that's one of the big things that has been missing in terms of library improvement process. As long as I've been with Scala, right? So how do you make the change, but like make sure people see it earlier?
Yeah.
Same as compiler flags. Anyway.
Okay, we have about 5 minutes to wrap up. On my to-do list, maybe a quick roundup of some of the open sips and slips. The JSON AST one comes to mind.
Okay. We should discuss those.
So, I mean, I think the last status that I've seen is that the prototype is done. He has like the two representations, like the safe and the fast one. I think basically what needs to happen is we need to somehow get this into the next phase and
does it have a shepherd yet?
I don't remember.
No, I think not really. I think I'm very impressed with the progress that it's Matthew, right? Patrick. Detrick. Sorry, Detrick. Yeah. Yeah. It starts with JS.
Okay.
So this is fixing the JSON AST that is used in.
That kind of goes contrary to the shepherd idea.
Yeah, that's
someone has to
fine.
be excited and volunteer for it. I mean,
I don't think I have time to actually shepherd anything right now. That's otherwise I would offer. But quick question: this is this proposal. Is this actually, we had a meta discussion about the standard library and modules.
Yeah.
Is this a proposal for a module or a proposal to be in the standard library?
I thought it was a module.
I think
This
everything
one
is a
should
module.
definitely be a module.
We're not really
Okay.
much to the library itself if it's not making stuff modules. That's my desire and my goal is that, you know, whatever we do to libraries to shrink it, spin some into modules. And I mean, the collections, I think, stay in the library.
If it's a module, who will maintain it? Is that
The maintainer of the module.
Like, hey, thanks for making a module. You're gonna keep maintaining it now. That's essentially, I think, what happens, right?
Sorry, Josh. I think we have a bit of a synchronization problem. What was that?
Oh, sorry. Thanks for writing the module. Now you can maintain it, right? That's what happens.
Kind of, you know, that's kind of clear.
Which I think is implied. If you're writing a new library, you would maintain it. So if you want to be a module,
Yeah.
you need to also be a library owner, right?
Yeah. I mean, we've had, like, the 2.11 experience with modules has been pretty good, I think. People have, like, module maintainers have changed over the course of the last 2 years. people have stepped up to become a module of something that wasn't maintained from the start. I mean, it's not exactly the same process because we decided these are the modules that we're spinning off. Now someone maintained them. Here it would be different. This is I think something that should be a module, and thus I'm happy to maintain it. So,
but will it still be shipped in the same jar, or?
I think
No.
I think well, I think that's a possibility. I think there's a spectrum of modules that are just available through the package index, and I think there are modules that graduate into these become. I mean, my opinion is that this becomes less and less relevant. I think we should have a core distribution that has a good set of functionality, and my opinion is that JSON is relevant enough that it should be in there. I think that's a separate discussion. I think we first need to have the meta discussion is how do we decide on this.
Yeah.
I mean, JSON is the new XML, right?
Yeah, right. Except we don't get grant.
I think that the answers to these questions are really just going to be different for different modules.
Yeah,
sure. Some modules are going to be maintained more by the core team. Others will be more up to the community, and if they become neglected, that's we feel bad, but that's just how it goes.
Yeah, I think it's
so I think we just need to have a web page with a list that says here are the modules and here's what the maintenance status is.
Yeah.
So that people will know that, because I see lots of questions about this on Dinner and IRC where people just don't know. They're just like, oh yeah, there's this jar. Is that maintained? Who's working on that? What is that?
No. Did you guys say Scala Center is actively working on this kind of a website, or is this something we need to make sure someone builds?
We're trying to release it soon, so I mean, we do have something, yes, but it doesn't have any information like that yet on it. It's a little bit more like, these are the dependencies, these are these versions, it's much more like, a direct mapping between, like from XML file or pump files and like GitHub and things like this. But I mean, these are all pieces of information that we could always include, because we do like offline indexing on this stuff. So we could parse, like build files and try to find like, okay, I know this is currently debate, but for example, we could try to look for flags, right? Or we could try to see if something is experimental as such, or we could, I don't know about exactly how we could say anything about who's maintaining it, but I'm sure there's some way we could probably include that information. We could probably fetch it from GitHub somehow. I don't know.
Yeah, like last commit and active committers and that sort of thing. Yeah.
I mean, right now it's kind of NPM looking with like, the thing has been updated by so and so, like, that many weeks ago, and these are the contributors of the thing. Like that stuff is all in there.
Okay, so yeah, as long the things that we're saying we're going to do, as long as someone is actively doing them, awesome. Unless someone is actively doing it, we should probably plan on it not happening.
Well, I think the situation is this: like we're currently kind of having a meandering debate, and if we could make a decision, then we could probably, put that in as a thing that we add to the index, right? But these are all so far, these are ideas that are kind of being passed around the table at the moment. I think we haven't settled on anything exactly. I mean, I can take insight from this conversation and try to push some of this stuff into the index, no problem. But I am currently unclear about what we should definitely put in.
Right. And until the index is actually released and people are using it, we won't really know what we need, right?
Also true.
So
I think an experimental, labels is definitely necessary.
Yeah.
So I have one thing that we probably should get some clarity on about the role of this committee, because it's now, I think we are a little bit in the void, because we don't really know exactly what this role is supposed to be, because I mean there are various constituencies. So there's the Scala team in Lightband who maintains the essentially Scala compiler and Scala library jar. There's essentially modules possibly outside Scala library jar. There is a potential group that will maintain the Scala platform, which is not yet formed, but I think we would like to have. There are alternative platforms like Scala.js and in the future Scala Native, there's Dotty. The question is what we discuss here. To what degree does that affect any of these groups? Is that something that, I mean, what I think that probably this committee should do is discussing proposals that come from the outside and then make a recommendation, essentially what would be the proper home for such a proposal. because I don't see any other things, because I have the impression that everybody here is sort of careful to say, well, like for instance with JSON, I mean, I've been a year positive, but probably the next one you said, well, this makes sense, but I don't really want to have it in Scala library jar.
Right.
Then do we kill it, or do we like put it on hold, or what do we do,
Yeah.
or do we suggest that it goes elsewhere?
Sorry, go ahead.
So I think that we can make a really clear delineation. I think, no offense, Sebastian, I think this can be like the Scala on JVM meeting. Sorry, like and because he's got his own community and ecosystem and whatnot that we have very little sort of involvement with, basically.
Yeah, I guess my role was.
And stuff that we do
more,
like feeds into him, right? Well, not you, but your project.
Sure. I think the reason I was invited to this meeting in the first place was also to make sure that Scala JVM did not do something that would then be like impossible to make work on Scala JS, or would be clearly very inefficient or so.
Yeah.
So it's definitely Scala JVM first, but.
Yeah. Guys, sorry, we have a hard stop for this meeting room that we rented for the hour, so we should probably sign off. But yeah, this is a very important question, and I think one of the key things is that we want to we want to facilitate the evolution, and we want to support the development of the community, and that's why the Scala Center is also an important force behind all this, right? And so the committee.
It's 12 o'clock.
Yeah. Exactly. It is 12 o'clock, and I couldn't think of a better way to end this meeting, but yeah, I think we should continue this cliffhanger, and you'll never believe what happens next. All right.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
See ya.